comes a moment, not in noise, not in rage, but in quiet, when life itself begins to speak. And it doesn't speak in words. It speaks through weight. The weight of what someone chose to do when they knew better. The weight of how they walked away like it meant nothing, when to you it meant everything. This is not about revenge. This is not about hoping they suffer. This is about truth and how it never stays buried. Because the ones who mistook your loyalty for weakness, the ones who manipulated your kindness, who lied, who used, who pretended, they will not escape the consequences. Not from you, but from life itself. There is a law older than any justice system, a law that governs the soul. And when someone breaks that law, it doesn't strike immediately. It waits, it builds, and then one day it crushes. Not with fire, not with thunder, but with regret. And that weight, they will carry it, because you were never a lesson to be discarded. You were the mirror they now run from. You were the chance they didn't realize they'd never get again. The consequences of conscious betrayal are inevitable. Betrayal is not always an accident. Sometimes it is carefully calculated. It is done with full awareness, full choice, and a complete understanding of the pain it will cause. That is what makes it so haunting, not just for the one who receives it, but eventually for the one who commits it. When someone betrays another soul who offered nothing but honesty, loyalty, and presence, they violate something sacred, and that violation comes at a cost, whether they realize it now or not. People often think they can outrun the consequences of their actions. They believe that if they just move on fast enough, keep themselves distracted long enough, or convince themselves that they had a reason, they won't feel the weight of what they did. But the truth is, reality doesn't operate on our personal timelines. There is a moral structure to life, one that cannot be manipulated or escaped. And when someone knowingly chooses to betray another, they enter a path where the consequences don't come from outside punishment, but from within. The tragedy is that in the moment the betrayer feels powerful. They believe they've won. They believe walking away, lying, or discarding someone makes them in control. But they don't understand what they've actually done. They have struck a wound not in the other person's body, but in their own soul. They have invited guilt into their future. They have signed a silent contract with regret, and it will collect its payment not in money, not in status, but in peace of mind. It may take months, it may take years, but the weight begins to build. It creeps in during moments of stillness, in the quiet spaces between accomplishments, in the pause after temporary distractions wear off. They'll remember the look in your eyes when they hurt you. They'll remember the words you never said, the trust you gave without condition, and the final silence that came when you stopped trying. These memories do not fade, they echo, and in time they begin to shout. That is why betrayal is never free, because even if the world never holds them accountable, their own conscience will. Even if they hide behind new relationships, new stories, or new versions of themselves, the truth remains untouched beneath it all. And that truth will weigh on them. Every time they try to rest, every time they try to feel whole, they will feel it, the emptiness created by their own choices. No betrayal, no matter how justified in the moment, goes without consequence. Life always remembers, and eventually so will they. Time has a way of turning pain into justice. At first it seems unfair. You suffer in silence while they move on with ease. You're left with questions, with wounds, with moments that replay over and over in your mind. Meanwhile, they laugh, they posed, they live as though nothing ever happened, and for a while you wonder if life is truly just, if pain is punished, and truth ever matters. But that's the illusion pain creates in its early stages. The truth, however, is this: time has a way of turning your pain into justice, not through revenge, but through revelation. You see, the effects of betrayal are not always immediate. Some storms don't announce themselves with thunder. They build quietly, invisibly, beneath the surface. And while you're rebuilding, reflecting, and healing, they're collecting the debt they don't even realize they owe. Time doesn't move at the speed of emotion. It moves at the speed of consequence. And it is incredibly patient. In the beginning, it might look like they've escaped the damage they caused. They seem happy, successful, even celebrated. But what you cannot see is what time is doing behind the scenes. Because while you are being refined in the fire of your suffering, they are being slowly surrounded by the aftermath of their own choices. Their relationships start to feel empty, their victories begin to taste bitter, and their inner world, the part no one can photograph or post, starts to feel hollow. That's the quiet justice time brings. Pain, when endured with integrity, becomes power. But betrayal, when committed without remorse, becomes a prison. And it doesn't matter how good they are at pretending. Time has a way of stripping the disguise. It exposes what's real. It reveals what's missing. The truth always finds its way to the surface, not because you force it, but because that's how reality works. What's buried in deceit cannot remain hidden forever. One day they will stop running long enough to feel the cost of what they did, and they won't be able to deny it. Not because someone called them out, not because the world turned against them, but because time turned the mirror around. The same timeline that gave them space to forget will now give them clarity to remember. And that clarity, that piercing, unfiltered understanding of who they became, will become unbearable. That's when justice arrives, not in your hands, but in theirs. When they realize that the person they left behind was the very thing they can no longer find in anyone else. That what they took for granted was irreplaceable. That the way they treated you wasn't just a chapter in their past. It was the fracture that changed the shape of their future. So if you're still in the pain, don't rush to see justice. Let time do what it always does. Let it reveal, let it expose, let it work. Because one day, what hurt you will haunt them, and what broke you will break through them, not through anger, but through truth. Guilt is the echo that never stops speaking. There's a unique kind of silence that follows betrayal, not the silence of peace, but the silence of something unresolved. Long after the apologies that never came, long after the explanations that were never given, something lingers. And though the one who caused the damage may seem unaffected at first, untouched even, over time, guilt begins to speak, quietly, consistently, and eventually without mercy. Guilt doesn't always show up like shame. It's not always dramatic. It doesn't knock the door down. In fact, it prefers subtlety. It waits until the room is quiet. It visits during the still hours, in the pauses between distractions, in the moments when no one is watching. It whispers reminders they didn't ask for. It shows them flashes of memories they tried to bury. It asks questions they don't want to answer. Why did you treat them that way? Why did you walk away like they didn't matter? What made you think you wouldn't feel this one day? They may deny it to others. They may even deny it to themselves. But guilt is persistent. It doesn't need a spotlight. It only needs a crack in the mask, one moment of honesty, one unexpected trigger, and suddenly they're face to face with the truth they thought they left behind. This is the weight of regret, not a punishment from outside, but a haunting from within. They carry on, thinking they've moved past what happened, They build new stories, new connections, new facades, but none of it is deep enough to silence what guilt continues to echo. Because no matter what they built it on a wound, and until that wound is faced, everything remains unstable. Eventually, they begin to feel the cost, not immediately, not all at once, but in pieces. They lose the ability to feel the same kind of love. They question if anyone truly knows them. They wonder if the version of themselves that hurt you is still hiding inside them, and that wondering, that uncertainty, becomes exhausting. They start comparing. They try to replicate what they lost, but nothing feels right because the pain they caused, you didn't just harm your world, it corrupted theirs. It changed their perception of themselves, and guilt does that. It rewrites identity slowly. It removes peace one layer at a time. You may never hear their apology, may never see their remorse, but don't let that deceive you into thinking they don't feel it. They do. In fact, it's often the ones who never speak about it that feel it the most. Because the loudest guilt is the kind that goes unspoken. It hides behind smiles, behind denial, behind success, but it's there, whispering constantly. And that is the echo they'll live with, a voice that never dies, a voice that says, "You knew what you were doing, and now you live with what you did. You were the lesson life prepared for them." Sometimes the most profound wake-up call a person will ever receive is the loss of someone who loved them purely. Not perfectly, but purely. Someone who showed up without hidden motives. Someone who forgave too much, stayed too long, and believed, even when belief became hard to carry. That person, you, was not just part of their story. You were the turning point they never saw coming. They didn't realize it at the time. Most people don't. They mistake consistency for convenience. They confuse kindness with naivety. And when someone is always there, always available, always giving, they begin to assume it's endless until it ends. Until the silence replaces the conversation. Until the boundaries replace the access. Until the warmth they were once so used to becomes cold, not out of spite, but out of necessity. That's when the lesson begins, not in your presence, but in your absence. That's when life starts to teach them something you never tried to force, because you were not their punishment, you were their mirror. And they shattered it. They looked into your loyalty, your love, your self-sacrifice, and instead of honoring it, they exploited it. That was their failure, not yours. They will meet others. They will have new chapters, new people, new experiences. But somewhere deep down, there will always be the comparison. A question that keeps showing up when the surface looks fine, but the depth is missing. Why doesn't it feel like it did with you? Because the truth is, it won't. You weren't replaceable. You weren't just another person. You were a rare moment of grace they didn't know how to carry. And the more they search to fill that gap, the more life reminds them, that was a lesson, and you failed it. You see, people often realize the value of something only when its presence is no longer available to them. They thought you were just a chapter, but you were the climax. You were the part the story doesn't recover from. And life, in its quiet wisdom, has a way of highlighting what we lost, not by punishing us, but by withholding what we once had. That's the kind of regret that doesn't scream. It simmers and stays. So when they think of you, and they will, it won't just be a memory. It will be a measurement, a standard they can't seem to meet again. And that realization will come with weight, because your love, your care, your loyalty, it wasn't disposable, it was divine. And they treated it like an option. But you weren't an option. You were the opportunity. the one they were supposed to recognize, respect, and rise for. And now they live in the world they created, a world without you, a world built on the ruins of what could have been. And that world will always feel a little colder. Because some lessons don't repeat, some are only taught once. Redemption is rare, and some learn only through ruin. We like to believe that everyone gets a second chance, that eventually people come to their senses, that they wake up, change, and make it right. It's a comforting thought that time and grace are enough to heal every wound and correct every wrong. But the truth is far more sobering. Redemption is rare, not because it's unavailable, but because few are willing to pay the price for it. Most people want the comfort of forgiveness without the responsibility of transformation. And when someone has caused deep harm, when they've violated trust, manipulated love, or discarded loyalty, redemption doesn't come cheap. It demands an honesty most are not ready to face. You are the test they didn't know they were taking, the kind of person life places in someone's path, not for entertainment or convenience, but as a mirror. And they failed, not by being imperfect, everyone is, but by being unwilling to grow, unwilling to be accountable, unwilling to see the damage they caused, not just in your life, but in their own. They walked away thinking they escaped the consequences, not realizing they were walking straight into them. Because here's the truth, not everyone learns through grace. Some only learn through ruin. Some only understand what they had when it's far too late to get it back. They don't awaken through reflection, they awaken through collapse, through loneliness, through the cold reality of a life that no longer contains the light they once took for granted. And that awakening, it's brutal. Not because someone else makes it so, but because the truth finally pierces their self-deception. When someone loses a good person, a rare, patient, loving presence, it rewires their inner world. At first, they'll deny it. They'll distract themselves with new people, louder environments, or busier schedules. But time has a way of pulling everything back to center. Eventually, all distractions fade, and when they do, regret begins to speak. Not with anger, with clarity. It reminds them of the conversations they dismissed, the efforts they overlooked, the moments they treated as routine when they were sacred, and perhaps most painfully, it reminds them of the version of themselves that allowed it all to happen. You see, regret isn't just about losing someone. It's about realizing you were the one who let it go. That's the weight they carry. It's not just about what they did to you. It's about what they became in the process. And that realization, it lingers. It affects how they show up in future relationships, how they trust, how they love, or fail to. Because when you break something pure without cause, you damage your own capacity to recognize purity again. Now they walk through life with a shadow. It follows them. Not because someone cursed them, but because they severed something essential. They lost the version of themselves who could have become more had they chosen better. And no matter how much they build, how much they pretend, how much they hide, they know. Deep down, they know who you were, what you offered, what they broke. And redemption, it's not impossible, but it's distant. It would require them to dismantle every lie they told themselves about why they left, why they hurt you, why they didn't fight to stay. It would mean confronting their deepest fear, that they were never the victim, that they were the cause. And for many, it's too much. So they stay in denial. And the longer they stay, the heavier it becomes. So don't wait for closure. Don't wait for them to return and make it right. Most never do. Not because you don't deserve it. You absolutely do. But because few people have the courage to become what redemption requires. Instead, Let them learn through the only teacher left, consequence. Let life break them where you refused to. Let time humble them where your kindness could not. Because some lessons are only learned at rock bottom, and while you rise, they remain, not because you wished it, but because that's what their choices created. A silent fall under the crushing weight of their own regret.